That was great. Thank you, Matt. I'd like to ask Matt, BJ, Richard, and Megan to come up for questions. While we're doing that, I have two announcements. One is Steve Centi said he lost or has misplaced something that he left on his seat here after his talk. A couple of scars. If anybody has seen them or knows where they might be, let him know or me know. The other is I got a great suggestion to start the posters tomorrow at 9:30. So those who are on tours early or maybe have two tours have more of an opportunity to see some of the posters. So unless there's an objection, let's just plan on that. Come, since the museum doesn't open until 10, come to the same east, that is Washington Street entrance you came to this morning, and we'll plan on having everything ready by 9:30 tomorrow. Thank you very much. So come on up, you guys. Okay, any questions?
So, Matt, your last slide there, or second to last slide, with everything that Tony it's interesting to me to be looking at trying to get museums to allow us to fasten bases to the floor, as opposed to what has been the practice of weighting bases, which is good for a tilting moment, but in a B wave, in an uplift, it just is more mass to rise up. Could you comment on that in terms of, is weighting things still a worthy thing, or, are we gonna have to try to say, no, we need to drill into that beautiful old floor?
Well, I think weighting can be a viable option when all other options have been exhausted. It's certainly far better than doing nothing. I think the potential drawback of it is if you get that vertical uplift that would sort of exceed the weight that was applied to the base, so that you get some type of liftoff. And naturally, when you get some type of liftoff, you're coming back down. And that creates a jackhammering effect. So I think it's always preferable to mechanically lock or have a continuous lock. That's one of the things that I was so taken with the Statue of Liberty, from the isolation effect of the arm to the extensive amount of linkage between that, all the way down keyed into the battlements of the island. It's just the firmest possible anchorage that possibly could be. And I think that's something we should aspire to.
Next question. Oh, come on. There we go.
My question is for Richard and Megan. I just wanted to clarify, did you say that your mounts were actually cast after the objects from your drawing? Did you say they were cast?
This one wasn't, but this is a direct print in stainless steel, a stainless steel bronze composite, but you can have them printed in wax and then cast in bronze, or brass or bronze.
But it is also printed in some way?
It's printed wax. Yeah.
And my other question is, what sort of size limitations do you have with that kind of technique?
Well, it all depends on where you get it printed from. I don't know exactly, but it's definitely smaller than if you were to print something out of plaster. The bed's probably about 12 inches by 12 inches, I would think. Maybe a little bigger, but it's definitely smaller.
Thank you.
What was the cost? What was the cost of the printing of the mount?
This one was, I think, $25. And if you got it in brass, I think it was around $45.
What's the turnaround time?
This, The stainless steel is 3 weeks and brass is longer. I think it's about a month.
This is done through Shapeways, which I guess is a New York company. It's
What,
more-
what was the name?
It was printed at Shapeways, which is a consumer startup. And there's places that'll do it locally. There's one in Washington.
You'll pay more.
They offered for prices, their best price was $300.
They also use a higher resolution printer, usually at the local places.
How much chasing were you doing? I mean, how much cleanup was left over from the process?
None.
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 Awesome.
Comes too clean.
Sold. Oops.
Please do. Thank you. Question for Richard and Megan. The cast final replica, is there different materials you can cast that out of? Like I know you mentioned metal, but I was wondering about plasters or things like plastics.
Yeah, you can do glass, ceramics, metals, chocolate. Really anything that could
What's
be
cost effective? What would be cost effective?
the most cost effective way is the plaster based, and it's quickest, but it's got the most resolution.
Anyone else?
On the 3D printing and the scanning, you mentioned that you use 2 different types of software. One of them was Rhino, and what was the other one?
Geomagic?
Geomagic.
Yeah, that's a mesh editing software.
I'd just like to make a comment. First of all, thank you, everybody, but especially I'm really pleased to see, Mac, your presentation and the emphasis on the threaded inserts. I mean, we're certainly guilty of pressure fit and force fit rods, and more than I would like. We're, as you said, it's partly practice, past practice, acceptance, and convenience and speed. And I really like your idea of when you have a block of time, if that ever happens with anybody, you make these standard sizes ahead of time and you have them on hand. And I think that for most of us, modifying those off-the-shelf components is a readily available way for anybody to do that. And hopefully we can all get to that point.
Yeah, also, I failed to mention that I made a conscious effort just to use the most common tools and equipment
Yeah.
to do that. So that was a drill press, a brazing setup, and some hand taps, and a step drill.
Mhm.
And that was
Along those lines, has anybody approached anybody like a Benchmark or other manufacturing people on? It seems like there's, or if not, now soon there will be a need for of these kinds of receivers. Has any thought be given to try to create a product?
That's an excellent question. Thank you for bringing it up. When we were toying around with that method, searching for a way to do things with off-the-shelf items, we were joking with each other, oh, go with it naturally. Just a joke, really. But I think it's worth pursuing, and I thank you for bringing it up. Maybe we could fire a question back at this audience. How many people out there think that there's a market for that? Pretty good. We'll look into it.
Great. Well, I mean, I think we can all look into it. I mean, I have lots of friends who are fabricators. Some of them work on producing, field products. I think maybe there's other people that other connections, and we should just branch out and be like, hey, can we market this? And and there are people, there's already we might not have to do it ourselves, we could try to do it ourselves, but, there's something like Benchmark, and maybe there might be already a structure in place for getting this thing.
Excellent. And, please feel free, we're not trying to corner or create a market on that at all. The purpose of this forum is to disseminate knowledge, information, practices, technique, and we hope standards. So if anybody has any ideas or connections for something like that, Vincent's mentioned Benchmark. Unfortunately, David and Mary Latouche were not able to make it to this forum. They send their regrets, but they are the owners of that company. If you're not familiar with it, you should look them up on the web. They really have a tremendous inventory of some very common and tested materials for mount making, and they're probably a great potential distributor of those if we can find somebody to manufacture them for a reasonable cost.
Next.
So I guess I'm wondering about combining the two, or the 3D printing and the need for this hardware. My understanding, and I guess I spoke with some colleagues of yours last week about the Shapeway system, and I went on Shapeway, and my understanding is that basically you provide them with a design, and if it's a ring, say I'm going to make a ring, and I will send it to them, and they'll print it to me for $3. They keep the design of the ring, and then someone else can visit their website, and if you like it, you can buy it. They'll print it for you, mail it to you, and then you get $1 or something like that for every ring. So potentially this hardware could be designed in a 3D design software program given to Shapeway, and then we could all just go on and order them. And I'd be curious to see what you thought about that.
Yeah, you have the option to do that with whenever you upload a file to Shapeways. You could either keep it private, like not everything is accessible to everybody, but you can make a shop and then you get a certain amount on each file. So if somebody came up with that file, or you could choose to not get anything, but you can just upload it and anyone can order it if they want to, and then they just pay the material costs.
Great idea.
So I have a question for how you're attaching your fastener. I'm assuming you're tapping the wall or the deck and then your finger tightening?
I keep thinking of the images up there, it's in my head. Our most common method is to stick a hex wrench in the hole, whatever will fit, and then tighten that set screw in the collar against one of the flat sides of the hex wrench, and then use the hex wrench to spin it into the thread.
You cast it, you can design on top of it. It's totally shaped for that.
Yeah, the set screws actually come with a hex top, but they are visible. And in the smaller sizes, you can get away with that, but we've noticed in the larger sizes that you can see that hex hole, and we find it somewhat distracting.
And the ones that we have made ourselves in the past, we would modify the existing fasteners. We would get socket end caps for through the center of that hex.
I guess if you're making them, if you're turning them on a lathe, your attachment post could be whatever your outside diameter is, and you can turn the pin down. So it's just more straight.
Yeah, the lathe is a wonderful piece of equipment, obviously, but it's beyond the reach of most people. Just trying to find ways to help people anchor their math system in a more positive mechanical way.
Just along the same lines, a few years ago now, we were doing a big installation, and so we went to a local fabricator who made up inserts for us. And they were about 3 inches long. The bottom 2 inches were threaded. They were about, I think they were like 1/2 inch in diameter with a 3/8 hole down the center. And then you could tap them and put in a set screw, but they also put a slot in the top, so you could use a flathead driver bit to put them in and take them out. And we ordered like 100 from them. And as a machine shop, they just turned them out in no time at all. Just having a design like that, you could take any machine shop in your neighborhood would be an easy way. And they weren't that expensive once they were making 100 for us, so it was really easy for them.
The cost would come down.
Yeah, but then, you know, on the post, you could put a little 16-inch rod in that would key into the same slot used for the screwdriver. Or you could drill it, tap it, and put in a set screw if you were worried about it pulling out. So for floor mounts, just a little brass rod to hold it so it didn't rotate. And for wall mounts, a set screw. That worked out great for us.
Very good.
That's certainly a great idea. Next. Oh, here we go.
I'm completely behind you in principle with your ideas of locking things down. One of the things that I'm finding at our institution is that slowly but surely the designers are taking over the hierarchy of our institution and basically rule the roost. And they determine casework, materials, and things like that. Very often that has a strong influence on what kinds of mounts we can make, regardless of what we would prefer to do based on the substrate. Maybe it's glass shelving, things like that, which it's virtually impossible to do some of these things. Wondering if everyone seems to be pretty supportive of this idea, if other people are finding similar trends in their institutions where it's actually making some of our job, our responsibility, actually more difficult to accomplish. Or if you have a comment, or if you've experienced anything yourself.
I think glass shelves are the biggest obstacle to achieving what I was talking about. And they're very common, although I had been under the impression that really more a thing of the past.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry to hear they tie your hands behind your back, and I think if there's any possible way you can start a dialogue with them and reference what we've been talking about today, particularly the damage. I'm sorry to say it is a most unfortunate way to have to learn what not to do, but sometimes just the shock of seeing that is just worth more than 1,000 words.
Unfortunately, I'm from the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, and we just opened that ginormous new American wing using a company called Gopion, who makes cases out of Italy, and one of their very standard materials is glass. And where even renovations of old galleries are utilizing these same materials, so it's becoming very difficult. And we are in an earthquake zone as well, so.
Yeah, you know, Gopion is a fabulous company. They'll make display surfaces out of whatever you want, but I think it speaks to what BJ was talking about earlier of mount making, getting out in front, being part of the planning process so that we can influence those decisions that are made that ultimately come down and have a profound effect on.
They don't invite us into the game until very late.
Sorry to hear. How's Brett doing? He didn't make it, huh?
He didn't. He's in Tennessee. He's in Nashville de-installing a show.
All right. Give him our regard.
Will do.
Sometimes I think also you need to assert yourself and insert yourself in the process and not necessarily wait for an invitation. And sometimes you rub some people the wrong way, but I think in the long run, the collaboration that can happen between the curators and the exhibit designers and mount makers and conservation. I mean, I think we all have our fingers in all of those areas, and making sure that the mount making stays a part of that is important. Pushing that, I think, is what we need to do.
I've had a similar situation at my institution. It's not just the designers, it's the young generation of curators coming in. Having been out in the museum world, they don't realize that people actually touch things. And I've had some actual fights about I just had a Richard Serra piece that I had to fight about having this big heavy piece of lead that could kill people, and they didn't want to see anything. It was the artist's intent that this just sit against the wall, and I had to really fight. We ended up actually putting a slot in the floor so they could rest into it, and so damaging the building, but that could be repaired. But I really had to fight on it, and it's kind of sad, but this is the reality.
But it's great, you did, you didn't, you did
Fighting the good fight.
Right, exactly. I think that's it's not always easy, but it's something that we should strive for.
I think what the larger subject that I keep hearing is, how do we ally ourselves with conservation and curatorial and people that have, in some ways, a greater weight to their words than we're considered to have. Because until you're viewed as more than a glorified carpenter, it's not seen, we're not seen to be taken seriously. And it's getting that working relationship with conservation, which hopefully is taken seriously, that I think is really important in getting our voice to be heard and getting out front. So the one other, I'm going to change the subject slightly and go back to the magazine, to the JAIC special edition that we wrote for. And have you attempted to buy a copy or have any idea of what the cost is? Because the one time I looked into it, it looked like it was $50.
Yeah, sorry to hear. No,
And
excellent point.
so I'm wondering if we may be able to approach JIC in a little more unified way and ask for a price break. Say, we'd really like to see this be out there in a wider thing, since this is a special edition and is really trying to provide information that is needed.
Yes, it's a tremendous resource. Excellent point. We'll do our best to contribute to that.
One of the things we find that we're competing against is outside contractors. Our Office of Exhibit Central, we serve all the Smithsonian museums, and we're often used as a kind of an internal contractor, and we're bidding against lots of different people and it's all based on price. And the amount you're talking about is more expensive than something we're going to recommend. We often find ourselves on the conservation end, and we're not going to do that. And there's plenty of people out there who are happy to install whatever's being asked of them. I don't know how to overcome that.
Well, I think we do have, at least I should speak for the two of us, the opportunity to dialogue with our conservation staff and occasionally even our administration staff and our curators on a fairly regular basis. And it speaks to the same issue we've been hearing here of building an understanding that they have no other way of getting. The edition that Jamie was talking about was mailed out to certain members, but our curatorial staff members did not get that. They're not reading these articles, they're not hearing of these issues unless we are conversing with them in informal ways. I find is the best way is, there's a cocktail reception. Go up, start talking to your curators, start talking to your conservators about the reality, and the damage you've seen, and the potential damage that they could be facing with their irreplaceable options. And as BJ pointed out, sometimes you do have to sort of elbow your way in. The informal opportunities we have to start dialoguing with the staff that Jamie mentioned might have a little more stature than we do, are the opportunities we have to start disseminating these standards that we're all striving for.
Also, I just want to comment along with that. What I've done at our institution is, because I have to say, of course, the same problems that we're all having trying to, get people to take seriously the idea of not making any earthquake mitigation in particular. One of the things I did was that after the Chicago conference, I was really impressed and enthused with everything that was going on there, and I thought it was something that was really exciting that would excite other people too. And I actually did a PowerPoint about the Chicago thing to show at a staff meeting, and that really excited people. So it actually became like a political moment, if you will. And so whenever I get a chance, I try to actually be assertive and do a formal thing where I will do presentations and make it so that it's almost embarrassing not to get behind mountain making. And fortunately, we have had a good education department, and people are excited, and they want to get more stuff like that, for their own, marketing purposes and things like that. But I think that's, a good thing.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Anyone else? Okay. I'd like to thank all the presenters. This has really been a pleasure for me, and it's turned out much better than I could have hoped for. And let's hope there are more, better, and in the future, and we all can chip in and do our part. Any other questions from the present presenters or comments?
Anybody thinking they might be able to host one of these forums?
New Orleans. Come on down.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah, please feel free to contact us. We try to do this every 2 years, and we're looking for a host in 2 years. Anybody who has an inkling, you don't have to guarantee anything at this point. We try to work out the subsequent host within the first 6 to 10 months after an event like this.
Well, while we're on that subject, the idea has been floated of London in 2016. Now, as exciting that is, there's still some obvious potential transportation problems with that. But we have called this an international forum from the get-go, and on the one hand, that would be a way to really provide an opportunity for European and maybe even Asian participants that may not be able to make it something in the U.S. So I think that's worth considering. I know it would be cost prohibitive for some of our institutions, but then again, the more work we do to raise the prominence of what we do, the more likely our institutions are to fund things like that.
Paul, can I add to that?
Please.
How many institutions here have curators, conservators, registrars going to other countries to look at what's happening? Their exhibit. So I think it's worth putting that on the table.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those kind of comparisons are completely valid.
What about simulcasting?
Well, the problem with that, as I found out for this, is having that kind of bandwidth in that particular building to do a live feed, which we don't.
What about not live?
And of course the time zone differences.
What about just putting online?
Well, and that's what we've done, and that's what we plan to do with this.
Okay.
You may not notice, but we're filming this right now. It's fine.
Well, the food in London is better than looking at it online.
Don't know about that.
One of the most valuable assets that we feel we achieve with these forums is the exchange, the immediate exchange between the, we talked to Paul about trying to lengthen the discussion period to draw the audience into the conversation and participation. Consider that human interaction to be essential. So I'm not against simulcasts in any way whatsoever, but we do consider the interaction with all of you to be essential and beyond anything else in terms of that. So I'm all for New Orleans.
Come on down.
Boston. Anyone else?
I just want to pick up on the notion of London. I worked overseas in London and then before that in Germany for 10 years, and people may disagree, but I really feel like institutions overseas could really use the help and expertise of what's happening in mount making here. And so if there is a way, in terms of also building that stature, of perhaps not having the conference there, but packaging some of the expertise and presenting workshops over there, some of the most prestigious institutions could really use it, in my opinion. And I think it would be mutually beneficial in that regard.
That's a good point. When I
Susie, any comment?
No, I agree. Yeah.
When I looked up preventative conservation to try and get a better understanding of what I thought I was going to present, I came across ICOM CC, which is primarily European-based. I mean, they try to be as international as possible, but they hold triennial conferences on preventative conservation, and I could find no reference to mount making. But maybe I could contact them.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you context, and I think there are like 3 good mount makers in London, but the institutional practice is really so much more limited, in my experience.
Well, let's absolutely continue this dialogue.
Thank you, Paul.
One thing I wanted to maybe bring up that we could talk about just briefly is just the forum in general. I mean, this is something we started as a real grassroots group and really come together beyond our wildest expectations, and it's growing all the time and is moving forward. But you know, it'd be great to hear from you guys, you know, where you see this going and where you'd like it to go, and so we could all work together to see that happen. And it could continue in the same way that it is right now, but it'd be great to sort of start the discussion to see, you know, if there's things that we can do, start doing now to maybe organize ourselves even in a better way. So kind of throwing that out to you guys and see, you know, if there's any thoughts.
I assume you're all aware of the email group we have. Anybody not? Oh, sorry. Okay. You can maybe get your cards out. You can contact BJ. He'll sign you up.
So part of the mount making forum is a email group. It's a listserv, it's through Google Groups, and it's very informal. And people can just post questions, and they can post topics to the group members. And, you know, it's a bit sporadic in the amount of chatter that goes on, but it really has been a quick way to put everyone in contact with each other. So I would gladly get information on that.
I mean, an interesting adjunct to that is that there's the pack-in forum, which is, you know, a much more set up website, and there's a mount making section on that, but it's rarely used. And as a way to show other people within the packing, creating, collections care community that we're here, it might be a place we want to go and hold some of our discussions. Because, you know, then it's like, I think I'll go to it and go, well, what are recent discussions? And it's 3 job listings from 2 weeks ago. And it's like, okay, well, there's nothing happening. So getting, kind of prodding that might be a really good way for us to just show ourselves.
And they've been very supportive of,
Oh, yeah.
of our group. They have always posted, the forum conferences. They posted follow-up notes from those conferences, and yeah, they've been a good advocate for us. So. And I've seen that making section, and it's it's slim. We've started to put together, as I mentioned earlier, a mount making page on the AIC Wikipedia site, and they've been very supportive of us, and it's an open invitation right now to start putting information onto that website. Started just briefly with archiving the past forums, and there's some basic information things in there, but it's kind of buried. It's not our own website like the packet groups, but so there are elements that are out there, but I can see lots of ways to improve it, to move forward.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Jamie. I would think that one could, as easily as one posts on the Mountmakers forum, you could just duplicate that post on the packing site at the same time.
So, Jamie, you're going to do it tomorrow on your manual of the work that you're doing and everything. So, do you want to talk a little bit about that, and you also talk about maybe doing a website, and so it's going to be a personal vision or something that maybe can be integrative with our group, or what are your thoughts about that?
Well, to give a little background, I almost feel better about it. To give a little background, years ago, when I was in the museology program at the University of Washington, I wrote a manual on mount making as my master's thesis. And I've given it to a few people. I'm currently re-editing it and reformatting it because it's in a really awful format and things. And so trying to make it so that I've got something that people can access, but I'm trying further to write an actual manual on mount making theory and practice. And I was hoping to present an actual book here with a poster session tomorrow, and instead I'm going to be talking with people about it and about input and what people would like to see in such a book, and ideas for it and possible collaborations. What Vince was talking about, we kind of were knocking around ideas, and he's got, handouts and things from his calculations on the tipping moments and all this work that he's been doing. And the thought of collecting those together in some way is a really interesting one. This then goes back to the wiki on the AIC site, which I found one day just by chance, and was like, oh my God, there's a whole mount making section here. And it actually has some stuff, and it's really an interesting little thing, but it's like, buried down a rabbit hole within AIC's site. So I was in private practice for 12 years and had a website, mountmaking.com, and never really got it up to potential. There's thoughts I've looked at possibly trying to resurrect that because it's just being squatted on right now. But it makes me wonder if if mountmaking.org is available and make it more of an educational site. So there's lots of ideas out there, and I don't necessarily have the energy or the skills to truly put something together that would be amazing, but I think we do. And so that's where, what you brought together with the original Getty forum before the first forum of the four, it started this ball rolling, and it continues to become more obvious that it's more important. And I think, Mac, your talk about the prevention aspect of all of this is the one that has to be hammered on again and again, because in the cutting of budgets, we're losing people, we're losing support, we're losing budgets. And somehow we've got to say, listen, you've got priceless stuff that you can, you can get AMLS grants to rehouse in new storage, but the exhibits are still a very vulnerable situation. So I don't know. I look forward to talking with everybody tomorrow in the poster session and just working as many ideas out as we can and finding the ways to work together.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I just have a question. Is there any place where all of the forums, the video has been compiled so that we can see the past forums as well, not just last year's?
I don't think there's video of everything.
Is there any information on the first one that was held at the Getty?
Everything that we have in all the formats so far is on the wiki site. And the first one wasn't videotaped. The second one, we had those webcasts, but some people have a hard time getting to those, but the links to those are on the wiki site too. And then Pam's wasn't videotaped, I don't think, right?
No.
And then this one will be. So it's, as we get our standards, we'll have more and more on it.
I have some of the PowerPoint presentations which probably could be put up with the Wikipedia site or even on the Field Museum site. But there's a little bit of time and energy. And,
but I'm glad to put them on the wiki site.
Just projects instead. But I do have some of them. I don't have all of them. But it would be great if I could have a little help to put them there.
Absolutely.
So,
I think that's the hope is that, with all the past presenters that, they're agreeable to have their presentation posted and at the very least through the wiki site.
well, I did ask the presenters from our forum if they wanted to have their PowerPoint presented on these sites, and very few people responded. So it was kind of like, what do I do?
Yeah, I think we have to revisit it.
Or just put them out there and see if they can find them.
But yeah, I think ideally that would be the hope, is to have those past presentations in some format available. At the very least, or a contact the person directly to get more information. At the very least.
So just a reminder to everybody to stick around for our reception. They may not be set up till 5:30, but if you leave, you may not be able to get back in after the building closes at 5, so I recommend sticking around. And then, of course, don't forget DJ Prairie Dog after that. Okay, anything else? Oh, go ahead.
Just before...
Do you need the mic?
No, I don't need the mic, I don't think. What would be the possibility of doing workshops as part of the forum?
Well, that's a really good question, and we did talk a little about that, and we know that Pam who has regular ones. Pam has periodic workshops at the field.
Yes.
Is it every year?
It's every year, Campbell Center for Historical Preservation in Mount Carroll.
And I didn't know about that. I think that'd be a great thing to be able to advertise. Well, I don't know if advertise is the right word, but at least publicize amongst the people who would be interested either on any of these sites that we've all mentioned. And the problem about combining it with this is largely a matter of time as far as I see it. You know, it's very difficult for me to envision doing it in less than 5 days. Something that would be beneficial for any beginner, who would be the target group as far as I know, the primary target group. And combining that with the 2 days of this and with the travel and then getting the budget to do it in the first place can be an obstacle.
I know for
but
us,
not impossible.
Yeah. For us, it's actually easier to get outside funding for 3 days. It's not as easy to get it for 2 days. So we try to combine things together to try to make a 3-day conference out of it, and then I can go for outside funding. But part of it, you know, we're not going to learn everything at the workshop, but for some things, it's just that opportunity to know what we don't know, or at least know what to look for. So, you know, whether it was a 4-hour workshop in introduction to TIG welding and how that works for museum mounts, or whether it's on bending plexiglass, so we're standing around watching it done, which is way easier than trying to describe that kind of stuff. Anyway,
I think some very good one-day things, information sessions could be planned and done.
So specialize in one topic.
Yeah.
Combined with a particular forum. That's not a bad idea. Well, great. No dearth of ideas. Let's just keep it up. Okay, now we're